Hello there. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras, and this is Dr. G's ADHD page, a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. Now, I am a clinical psychologist. Actually, I'm a neuropsychologist, but what the heck. And I am in private practice, and I also am the parent of at least one confirmed ADHD child, and another I'm not so sure about either. This presents some interesting kind of issues with me because when I was a young parent, we didn't have ADHD, believe it or not. We didn't have the diagnosis. We didn't have ADD. We didn't have ADHD. We had hyperkinetic disorder of childhood, and there was a subtype of adolescence. Because in those primitive times, we thought that people actually grew out of this stuff. We did not understand that this was actually a neurologic condition and it was going to be passed through generations. And it wasn't just bad parenting or just a bad kid or just lousy protoplasm or any of that stuff. It was, or it is, a neurologic condition. And we really still have problems with that to this day. I mean, I sometimes think the biggest problem ADHD kids have is they look normal. Okay? And, in most ways, they are normal. But that led to a lot of problems and difficulties in my particular household and in the households of a lot of my patients. Every parent has certain goals and desires and dreams for their child. For most of them in my generation, it was go to college, get good grades in school, or good enough to get into college anyway, and then graduate from college and get a good job, and basically keep that job until it was time to retire. That was kind of the model. The problem, I think, becomes particularly for an ADHD child is they look like other kids, they sound like other kids. A lot of the time they act like other kids, but they've got some problems that other kids don't have, and that causes difficulties. Like, my kids were all really bright. I mean, of course, I'm a psychologist, so we measured all that stuff. Actually, we had friends do it, but they're all really bright. I thank their mother for that. I think that's probably where it came from. But the problem comes when you're trying to mold them. Okay, like I had one guy come in, nice young fella, recent college graduate, and he wanted to go to law school. He had dyslexia and ADHD. And if I were going to pick a profession for him to not go into, being a lawyer would have led the top of the chart. I mean, there's no way. I mean, you think of what a lawyer does, most of them, when they're not, in TV shows doing exciting courtroom scenes, is that they're mostly poring over long, boring kinds of documents that are written in legalese, which is not the same as English, and having to try to interpret the nuances, the fine little differentiations. I mean, it would be, first of all, you have troubles paying attention, and second of all, you don't read very well. There's no way. But his dad was a lawyer. His grandfather was a lawyer. And by God, he was going to be a lawyer or die trying. And I can tell, his law firm runs TV ads in this area. So I know he's out there doing the lawyering. And I can tell by the changes in personnel in the ads that his father has probably retired, and that he's now in charge of the whole practice. Okay, but I guarantee you, he gets a lot of help from somewhere, because running a practice is a big enough pain, or a big enough. It would be the kind of thing that an ADHDer would have a lot of troubles with. Tons of details and minutia that aren't very intrinsically exciting. It's just the kind of a job that would make it even worse than just being a lawyer and having most lawyers do not do criminal law, and so they're looking at loans and wills and all that kind of stuff. Which is not terribly entertaining reading if any of you have had that opportunity. But, he was inculcated enough that in the family plan that he really wanted to do it. And okay, more power to him. But if in a lot of families, let's just say in a lot of families, that's not enough. It's not enough that dad's a lawyer and grandpa's a lawyer. It's, I hate this stuff. I don't want to do it. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to do it. And then you've got a whole big pain. You've got a whole lot of problems. Okay. And we are also in the middle of a whole trend. Now, when I was in school, at least in high school, there were different tracks. So you could go into the shop track or something, which trains you in carpentry and electronics and automobile engineering and that sort of stuff. And then there were the college track people, and then there were the general people, and I do not know what happened to them, because it didn't seem to me like it was much training for work. And then the girls could get the secretarial thing. Now, told it, so don't get all upset. That's just the way it broke out, okay? Wasn't my choice. The deal with all of this, though, is that it was considered okay if you wanted to become a carpenter. You could become a contractor, own your own company if you wanted to, whatever. Nowadays, everybody's expected to go to college. And I think it was frankly that way for my kids. You're supposed to go to college. What's the matter with you? Why aren't you in college? Everybody goes to college. We even took the industrial arts track and put it in community college. So you're still going to college. That's one of the things I have to be careful about when I'm doing an evaluation, because when you're doing testing, you have norms, and the norms are based on age and education. So is 2 years of carpentry and instruction the same as 2 years of college? I'll give you plenty of time to answer that for yourselves, but it's one of the things that has become sort of an idea that everybody should go to college. And I really think that a lot of people really don't want to go to college, but they're pushed to, and most school systems do not have the different tracks. So you have a kid who wants to be a carpenter, and he's in a college track program, where he's being prepared to go to college, and he hates every minute of it. So, the net effect is we're seeing a lot more kids drop out of school, get their GED, and then get formal training or start to work and go through the apprenticeship system. But they're not being served well by the academic system. And if you have an ADHD, especially, well, maybe you don't yet, but when they get to be teenagers, they become a little harder to handle than they were as kids. They have very, well, how adolescents are anyway. The emotional part of the brain is fully developed. The judgment part is not developed, not fully developed. So whatever you do, don't buy your kid a Camaro or a Corvette when they turn 16. that would be a nightmare. But you have to be flexible about, and you have to look at what your child's interests are, your ADHD child's interests are, and try to help encourage them to do something. Because you remember, ADHDers can pay attention, but they don't have good control over what they pay attention to. They do a better job paying attention to things that they like and naturally are interested in. So, for gosh sakes, try to find out what all those things are. It's probably pretty obvious to you. You need to find out what the things are that they're interested in, and see, how does that fit with different kinds of vocations. Like my youngest, I was just talking to his mother this morning about him when he was young, and one thing that kind of stuck with me that I hadn't really paid much attention to is that even from a very young age, from age 4 or let's give him 4, he used to make stuff. He used to take rubber bands and paper clips and little pieces of wood and that sort of stuff and make things, wheels and little cars and stuff only he knew what it was, kind of things. And she told me one story. When he had chicken pox, and he was at home for quite a while. So what he started doing is modifying all the ballpoint pens. He modified them so that they shot the refills when you press the button, just to entertain himself. And I had no idea what he was going to do when he grew up. We were encouraging college and hoping that it would be college, but then he got interested in crystals. First of all, he got interested in crystals. Apparently, healing properties, vibration, I don't know, stuff. Well, you don't read about it in a lot of journal articles, let's put it that way. Anyway, so he was interested in all that. And then he got interested in semi-precious stones. And then he got interested in precious stones. And then he decided he needed more formal training. So he went to an outfit called GIA, Gemological Institute of America, which I'd never heard of, but apparently it is quite well known in the field of, what do we call that? Jewelry design or gems in general, okay? So he learned all about identifying the different kinds of stones and all about valuing them. And, he's the guy that you could hire to come in and look over grandma's jewelry after she died and determine the value of that whole pile of stuff and those kind of things, which of course he was totally not interested in. But that's one of those, I never had considered jewelry design. I had never considered being that interested in gems. But he was, and he still is. And he designed some really nice looking pieces. When he comes home for a visit, he takes over my bonus room, which is my gym, and takes over just a little corner of it, and is always whittling away at wax of some kind. I don't know exactly what it is, but apparently that's how they make jewelry nowadays. Is you make a thing out of wax, and somehow that makes a mold. That somehow then they make your piece whatever it's supposed to be. But it's kind of interesting, and it's like, wait a minute, this is the same kid who couldn't stay still for a minute, and he's spending hours doing this very meticulous, some might say, I certainly would, tedious kind of work. But he apparently loves it. Okay. But that wasn't anything I said he had to do. Okay. That was certainly not. Or his mother for that, Uh, but that was an interest, and you had to let him follow that. And I think I wish I had known that back in the day, when I was a young father. And I probably would have been um, much nicer to be around. Let's put it that way. That was well, when you take somebody who's got a disorder that doesn't look any different from any other kid, but the behavior is like, whoo, outlandish. And then you take somebody who's used to a certain amount of order. Well, frankly, I was a military officer. I was used to people yes sirring me and no sirring me and saluting and all that stuff. And I come home and I got this kid yelling no at me. Sometimes it was not all that smooth and comfortable. And I don't guess I destroyed him too bad, but it could have been if I had known what the heck was going on. If, like I said, they did not even have a name for it back in those days, and even now the ADHD is kind of a bad name for what it really is. But that's the way it goes. So as a parent of an ADHD child, a lot more is demanded of you than if you're just got a neurotypical kid. You've got a child that's got some neurologic equipment that is a little different from the neurotypical kid. And it doesn't mean they're not bright. I mean, like I said, all of my kids have superior IQs. I know because I got the test reports. That doesn't mean anything by itself, okay? Most of success in the world has got nothing to do with intellectual ability. It just has to do with persistence, okay? If you're going to stick to it, you'll probably eventually do well, including even if you're not real extremely bright. Being average is perfectly acceptable for almost everything in life, as long as you really want something. And if I had known that, a lot of the other stuff about ADHD kids way back in the day, I could have had a much easier time with my own family. Instead, I work with a lot of other people and hopefully make their day a little easier, or their lives a little bit easier. Okay, that's me for this week. Thank you for watching. Remember, this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. It's a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers, because we need ADHD people. We need people who think outside the box. Neurotypical thinkers don't change things. They make things stay the same. They keep the system going, but they don't typically cause major changes. And we need folks to do that, because the it gets ossified and slows down and isn't efficient anymore, as we're seeing right now if we watch the news. Anyway, so leave me some questions or make some comments somewhere down below here. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know, if we're on task with what we're talking about. If there are other things you would like to hear about, please let me know. Okay, and that will do it for this week.